Fabulous. Box. Fabulous. Unfortunately, that is thus a P16.
So sorry, guys.
Yeah, no problem, Lewis. Fabulous. So that's P10. Yeah, sorry about that. Bit of a shit result, given all the hard work. If we could have HPP 1, position 14, 1, position 14, and then strat mode 1.
Is there even a point for that position?
Yeah, we do get a point.
Hello everyone, this is the Casual Fan. Now, Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes had a rather torrid time in the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. The race saw Lewis Hamilton getting eliminated in Q1 and then finishing 10th in the race. Now, first of all, if we are fair, Lewis Hamilton had every opportunity to finish 6th in the race, but the delay in pitting for medium tires worked against the Mercedes driver. But looking at the entire weekend, I think we could say that one thing was obvious. At least for now, Mercedes is not battling Red Bull and Ferrari at the front. That is just not the battle it is part of. It is battling the likes of Haas, Alfa Romeo, Alpine and Alfa Tauri. Sure, the team has the third fastest car on the grid right now. Sure, that is the case. I mean, it's undeniable after the way Hamilton was able to march through the field. But the gap behind is, well, it's much smaller than the gap in the front. By Mercedes and Lewis Hamilton's standards, the first two races have been, well, mediocre at best. The car, in all honesty, is not even in podium contention for now. And after reflecting on the first two races, it does appear that, well, the days of mediocrity for both Mercedes and Lewis Hamilton might be here to stay for some time. Okay, now before I proceed, will you please hit that subscribe button, like and share this video and help the channel grow. Thanks a lot. Now let's get back to the video. Now, after two races and watching the different concepts perform on the track, it does appear that maybe we need to address the elephant in the room. The Mercedes No-sidepod design that it introduced during the pre-season test in Bahrain might not be the best solution for the new regulations. In Formula 1, more often than not, when you have a novel idea introduced by one team on the grid, if that idea is good, then it gets replicated on the other challenges during the season, or it gets questioned in terms of its legality. However, if that idea does not hold potential, no one bats an eye. When the Mercedes No-sidepod design made its debut during the pre-season test, sure, it caught attention, but it did not cause panic or even complaints up and down the grid. In fact, teams like Ferrari and Haas were quite open in admitting that this was one of the earliest designs that was discussed but discarded because they felt the other conventional design looked more promising. Ever since Mercedes has introduced this radical design, the car has just not looked the part. The drag is obvious, so is the purposing effect. The team is around half a second slower than the frontrunners in qualifying and around 7 to 8 tenths slower in the race. That is not the kind of gap you make up by turning a key or finding a silver bullet. Mercedes and Lewis Hamilton might hold some advantage or might be able to perform a bit better on the slower speed sections of a track, but overall, the days of pain might be here to stay for a while. Now, after the design, let's talk about the second limiting factor. The new regulations have changed the way teams approach the sport now. Gone are the days when teams blew the lid off their budgets and tried everything possible to improve their machinery. That is just not the case now, as the new era of cost cap means that the teams need to be more efficient and cannot afford to make mistakes. This season, Mercedes unfortunately appears to have made a misstep and will need to make improvements with what they have in terms of the cost cap. To add to this, the German team was the constructors champion last season, because of which it faces a reduced wind tunnel time during the first half of the season as compared to the rest of the grid. With such limiting factors in place, Mercedes is already giving up ground to both Ferrari and Red Bull. And to add to this, it is already more than half a second behind in terms of performance. Sure, Mercedes might just need to learn more about the car, and the learnings will help close the gap to the front. That surely could be the case. However, Mercedes still needs the wind tunnel time to find out whether the solution it wants to implement on its car are going to yield the desired result. If we are honest, then if Mercedes had made a mess of it in any other era in Formula 1, it might have had a simpler and more optimistic route back to the front of the grid. But right now, looking at the way the rules have been written and how things have become a bit more restricted, Hamilton might not be back in contention for wins for some time now. After the first two limiting factors, let's look at the third glaring weakness that Mercedes might not be even focusing on right now. The two races in Saudi Arabia and Bahrain had the spotlight entirely on the chassis department of Mercedes. The car was just not good enough to fight at the front, and it was nothing more than a bit of fortune that helped Lewis Hamilton to bag a podium in Bahrain. However, in all of this, there is one thing that got swept under the rug. Lewis Hamilton and George Russell were innocuously put on hard tires for the second stint in the Bahrain Grand Prix. In any other close competition, that could have proved detrimental. However, since Mercedes was in a no man's land in Bahrain, it did not have much of an impact. The bigger goof up was a setup error for Hamilton in Saudi Arabia. Hamilton qualified in 17th for the race, the first time he had done that on pure pace since 2009. However, the weekend of goof-ups did not end there, as Mercedes missed the prime opportunity to pit Lewis Hamilton for the medium tire during the VSC period. A P10 result that Lewis achieved in the race could have easily been 6th if the team was on its toes. After winning its 8th consecutive title last season, it does appear that Mercedes is in a bit of a disarray at the moment. The car is not up to the mark, and the strategy is not matching the lofty standards it always used to have. The only positive is the drivers' combination of George Russell and Lewis Hamilton that are wringing the neck of their cars and scoring whatever they can. It might just be plain stupid to count out a team like Mercedes that has won the constructors' title for the last 8 seasons. After 2 races and looking at the state the team finds itself in right now, it might be safe to say that the days of mediocrity for Mercedes and Lewis Hamilton might be here to stay for a while. So these are my views about the current state of Mercedes and Lewis Hamilton in Formula 1. What do you guys think? Please let me know in the comment section. Please like, share and subscribe the channel. Thanks for watching and see you next time.